Part 1. The isolated cabin. Rebecca's hands shook as she poured her third cup of coffee that morning. The silence in the old wooden cabin felt heavy, like a thick blanket she couldn't shake off. Outside her window, tall pine trees swayed in the cold mountain wind, their branches creaking like old bones. She had been living here for 6 months now, and some days the quiet drove her crazy. The cabin belonged to her grandmother, who had passed away last year. Rebecca remembered visiting this place as a kid during summer vacations. Back then it felt magical. Now it felt like a hiding spot, a place where she could disappear from the world that had fallen apart around her. Her laptop sat open on the small kitchen table, showing an email from a client who wanted changes to their website design. Rebecca stared at the screen, trying to focus. Working as a freelance graphic designer wasn't easy up here. The internet connection was terrible, cutting out whenever the wind got too strong, but it was enough to pay for groceries and keep the lights on. She clicked reply and started typing. "I'll have the changes ready by tomorrow." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Tomorrow felt like such a long time away when every day stretched on forever. The closest neighbor lived 3 miles down the mountain. Rebecca had never met them. She liked it that way. After what happened in the city, she wanted nothing to do with people. People lied. People left. People broke promises and hearts without thinking twice. Rebecca got up and walked to the window. Snow was starting to fall again, tiny white flakes that would soon cover everything in a fresh blanket of white. Winter was coming fast, and she still hadn't figured out how to use the old wood stove properly. Her grandmother had made it look easy, but Rebecca struggled to keep the fire going for more than a few hours. The divorce papers were still sitting in a box under her bed. She couldn't bring herself to look at them again. 5 years of marriage gone, just like that. Michael had found someone else, someone younger and more exciting. He said Rebecca had become boring, that she never wanted to go out anymore, that she spent too much time working. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had become boring. But what did he expect when he started coming home later and later? When he stopped asking about her day, when he looked at his phone more than he looked at her? The job loss came right after the divorce papers were signed. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal. But everything felt personal now. Like the whole world was telling her she wasn't good enough, wasn't worth keeping around. So she packed her car with clothes, her computer, and a few boxes of stuff that mattered. She drove 8 hours into the mountains to this cabin that held memories of better times. Her parents thought she was having a breakdown. Maybe she was. But at least here nobody could hurt her anymore. The cabin was small but cozy. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living room with a stone fireplace. The walls were made of real logs, and you could smell the wood even after all these years. Her grandmother's furniture was still here. An old rocking chair, a dining table with scratches from decades of use, bookshelves filled with romance novels and cookbooks. Rebecca had thrown out most of the old food when she first arrived, keeping only the canned goods and dried pasta. She wasn't much of a cook anyway. In the city, she and Michael had ordered takeout most nights. Here she was learning to make simple meals from whatever she could find at the small grocery store in town, 20 minutes down the winding mountain road. Going to town was always an adventure. The road was narrow and full of curves, with steep drops on one side that made her stomach flip. In good weather, it wasn't too bad, but when it rained or snowed, the drive became scary. Rebecca had already decided that once the snow got really deep, she would stock up on supplies and just stay put until spring. The loneliness hit her in waves. Sometimes she could go all day without thinking about it, busy with work or cleaning or reading one of her grandmother's books. But then evening would come, and the silence would wrap around her like cold water. No one to talk to, no one to share dinner with, no one to laugh at silly TV shows with. She had tried calling her sister Amy a few times, but the conversations always felt forced. Amy lived in California with her husband and 2 kids. She had the perfect life that Rebecca thought she wanted. Amy would ask how she was doing, and Rebecca would lie and say everything was fine. What was the point of telling the truth? That she spent most days in pajamas? That she sometimes forgot to eat lunch? That she talked to herself just to hear a human voice? Her parents called once a week, always on Sunday evenings. They worried about her living alone in the mountains. They wanted her to come home, to move back to her childhood bedroom until she figured things out. But Rebecca was 28 years old. Moving back home felt like admitting defeat. The cabin had belonged to her grandmother for 30 years. Grandma Rose had moved here after her husband died, saying she wanted peace and quiet. Rebecca used to think that was sad, being alone for so long. Now she understood. Sometimes being alone felt safer than being with people who could leave you. But the mountains were different from the city. At night she could hear sounds she didn't recognize. Owls calling to each other. Something rustling in the bushes outside her window. The wind making the whole cabin creak and settle. Sometimes she would lie in bed, listening to all these wild sounds, feeling like she was the only person left in the world. During the day, she would sit by the window and watch the forest. Deer would sometimes walk through the clearing behind the cabin, stepping carefully through the tall grass. She saw a fox once, red and quick, disappearing into the trees before she could get a good look. Birds she couldn't name sang from the branches above. There was something beautiful about it all, but also something that made her feel very small. The mountains were so big, so permanent. They had been here long before her grandmother, long before anyone. They would be here long after she was gone. It was comforting and terrifying at the same time. Rebecca finished her coffee and looked at her laptop again. The email was still open, waiting for her to finish typing. She deleted what she had written and started over. Thank you for your patience. I'll send the revisions by end of day tomorrow. Best regards, Rebecca. She hit send and closed the laptop. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, covering the world in white silence. Winter was coming, whether she was ready or not. She just hoped she could make it through until spring, when maybe things would start to feel normal again. But deep down, she wasn't sure what normal meant anymore. The life she had known was gone. This mountain cabin was her world now, for better or worse. All she could do was take it one day at a time, one cup of coffee at a time, one silent evening at a time. Part 2. The Unexpected Visitor. The storm hit on a Tuesday night in late November, and it was unlike anything Rebecca had seen since moving to the mountains. The wind howled like an angry animal, shaking the cabin so hard she worried the old walls might give way. Snow pelted against the windows with a sound like tiny rocks being thrown. She had lost power around 8 o'clock, and now the only light came from a few candles she had found in her grandmother's kitchen drawer. Rebecca sat huddled on the couch, wrapped in every blanket she could find. The fire in the wood stove had died out hours ago, and she couldn't get it started again. Her hands were too cold, too shaky. The temperature inside the cabin was dropping fast, and she could see her breath in the flickering candlelight. She had never felt so helpless in her life. In the city, when the power went out, it was fixed within hours. Here she might be without electricity for days. Her phone had no signal, and even if it did, who would she call? She didn't know anyone for miles around. The storm raged on through the night. Rebecca dozed fitfully on the couch, waking up every time the wind got louder or something crashed outside. By morning, she felt exhausted and frozen to the bone. When she looked out the window, the world had disappeared under at least 2 feet of fresh snow. That's when she heard it. A heavy, steady knocking on her front door. Rebecca froze. Nobody knew she was here. Nobody came up this far into the mountains, especially not during a storm like this. Her heart started pounding as the knocking came again. 3 firm raps that echoed through the quiet cabin. She crept to the window and tried to peek through the frost that had formed on the glass. All she could see was a large, dark shape on her front porch. Someone was definitely out there, but she couldn't make out who it was. Hello? A deep voice called through the door. Anyone home? I'm checking on folks after the storm. Rebecca didn't move. She barely breathed. Who was this person? How did they know she was here? What did they want? The voice came again, gentler this time. I know someone's in there. I can see the candlelight. I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Jake Thompson. I live about 5 miles up the mountain. I'm just making sure everyone's okay after last night. Jake Thompson. The name meant nothing to her, but something in his voice made her think he was telling the truth. Still, she hesitated. She had come to the mountains to get away from people, to be alone. The last thing she wanted was some stranger showing up at her door. But the cabin was so cold and she was so tired, and the storm had scared her more than she wanted to admit. Maybe this Jake person could help her get the fire going again. Slowly, Rebecca walked to the door. She left the chain lock in place and opened it just a crack. Who are you? She asked. The man on her porch was huge. That was her first thought. He had to be at least 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the entire doorway. His face was mostly hidden behind a thick, dark beard, and he wore a heavy coat covered in snow. But his eyes were kind, a warm brown that reminded her of hot chocolate. "Like I said, I'm Jake Thompson," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I live up the mountain a ways. I'm a guide during the summer, help folks hike and camp safely. During the winter, I check on people who live alone, especially after big storms like this one." Rebecca studied his face through the crack in the door. He looked tired, like he had been walking through the snow for a long time. His cheeks were red from the cold and snow clung to his beard and eyebrows. "How did you know I was here?" she asked. "Your grandmother Rose and I were friends," Jake said. "She always worried about people getting stuck up here during bad weather. When I heard someone was living in her cabin now, I figured I should keep an eye on things, especially with winter coming on strong." The mention of her grandmother made Rebecca's chest tighten. Rose had never mentioned anyone named Jake, but then again, there was a lot about her grandmother's mountain life that Rebecca didn't know. "I don't need any help," Rebecca said, though even as she said it, she could feel how cold the cabin was behind her. Jake nodded slowly. "That's fine. But I noticed your chimney isn't smoking, and I'm guessing you lost power in the storm. Mind if I ask when you last had a hot meal?" Rebecca couldn't remember. She had eaten some crackers and peanut butter for breakfast, but that was cold food. The thought of something hot made her stomach growl loudly enough that Jake probably heard it. "Look," Jake said, shifting the large backpack on his shoulders. "I'm not asking to come in or anything, but I've got some supplies in my pack. Firewood, some canned soup, a little camp stove that runs on propane. If you want, I can leave them on your porch and be on my way." Rebecca looked at this strange giant man standing in the snow on her front porch. Everything about the situation should have scared her. She was alone in the mountains with no way to call for help, and here was this massive stranger she had never seen before. But something about Jake made her feel safe instead of frightened. Maybe it was the way he kept his distance, not trying to push his way inside. Maybe it was how he talked about her grandmother like she had been important to him, or maybe it was just that she was so cold and hungry and tired that she didn't care about being careful anymore. "Okay," she said quietly. "You can leave the supplies." Jake smiled, and it transformed his whole face. The stern mountain man became someone warm and friendly, someone who looked like he laughed a lot. "Great, give me just a minute." He shrugged off his backpack and started pulling things out. A bundle of split firewood, 2 cans of soup, a small propane camping stove with a pot, a thermos that steamed when he opened it. "Coffee," he explained, holding up the thermos. "Made it fresh this morning before I started making my rounds. Still hot." The smell of coffee hit Rebecca through the crack in the door and she almost cried. She hadn't had hot coffee in almost 12 hours, and the thought of it made her realize just how miserable she had been. "I also brought this," Jake said, pulling out what looked like a small electronic device. "It's a satellite radio. Works even when the power's out and the phone lines are down, in case you need to reach someone." He set everything neatly on her porch, making sure the firewood was stacked so it wouldn't roll away. When he was done, he stepped back and shouldered his empty backpack. "The stove is pretty simple to use," he said. "Just turn the knob and light it with a match. The firewood is good and dry, so it should catch easy. And if you need anything else, anything at all, you can reach me on channel 7 of that radio. I check it every few hours." Rebecca stared at the pile of supplies on her porch. This stranger had just given her everything she needed to get through the next few days, and he was asking for nothing in return. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Jake was quiet for a moment, looking out at the snow-covered trees. "Your grandmother helped me through a really dark time in my life," he said finally. "She never asked for anything back, just did what needed doing. I guess I'm trying to do the same." He looked back at Rebecca through the crack in the door. "The storm's moving on, but we'll probably get more snow tonight. Make sure you keep that fire going. And don't be afraid to use the radio if you need help. Mountains can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." "Thank you," Rebecca said, and she meant it more than she had meant anything in a long time. Jake touched the brim of his wool cap. "Take care of yourself," he said. Then he turned and walked back into the snow, his boots crunching as he disappeared into the white forest. Rebecca stood at the door for a long time after he was gone, staring at the supplies he had left behind. Finally, the cold drove her to action. She opened the door wider and started bringing everything inside. The coffee was still warm, and she poured herself a cup with shaking hands. As she sat by the window, watching the steam rise from her mug, Rebecca realized something had changed. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. Part 3. An unusual proposition. The next morning, Rebecca woke up to the sound of someone chopping wood outside her cabin. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then she heard it again, the sharp crack of an axe splitting logs followed by the thud of wood hitting the ground. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and went to the window. There was Jake, working steadily beside a pile of fallen branches that must have come down in the storm. He had already cleared a path from her front door to the road, and now he was cutting up the storm debris into firewood. Rebecca watched him work. Even from inside, she could see how easily he handled the heavy axe like it weighed nothing at all. His movements were smooth and practiced, the kind that came from years of doing the same job. Steam rose from his body in the cold morning air, and she realized he had probably been working for hours. She made coffee with the camp stove Jake had left her and got dressed quickly. By the time she opened the front door, he had stacked at least 2 weeks' worth of firewood beside her cabin. "Good morning," Jake said, leaning on his axe handle. His cheeks were red from the cold and the work, but he was smiling. "I hope I didn't wake you up." "You didn't have to do this," Rebecca said, gesturing at all the wood. "Storm brought down a lot of branches," Jake replied with a shrug. "Figured they might as well be useful instead of just lying around making a mess. Besides, you're going to need firewood to get through the winter, and buying it in town costs a fortune." Rebecca looked at the neat stack of split logs. It probably would have cost her hundreds of dollars to buy this much wood, and she wasn't even sure her little car could have hauled it up the mountain road. "At least let me make you breakfast," she said. "It's the least I can do." Jake hesitated. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You're helping me survive." Rebecca surprised herself with how direct she sounded. "Come on, I've got eggs and bacon, and your camp stove actually works better than my old electric one did." Jake stuck his axe in a stump and followed her inside. The cabin felt different with another person in it, smaller but also warmer somehow. He was so tall he had to duck slightly to avoid hitting his head on the low ceiling beams. "Your grandmother had the same problem with the power going out," Jake said, looking around the cabin. "She finally got herself a generator, but the thing was always breaking down. I must have fixed it a dozen times." "There's a generator here?" Rebecca asked, cracking eggs into a pan. "In the shed out back? Haven't you seen it?" Rebecca shook her head. She had been so focused on just getting through each day that she hadn't explored much beyond the cabin itself. "We should take a look at it after breakfast," Jake said. "Probably just needs some basic maintenance to get it running again." Your grandmother never was much for mechanical things. As Rebecca cooked, Jake told her more about Rose, how she had moved to the mountains after her husband died, just like Rebecca had come here after her divorce. How she had struggled at first, not knowing how to do things like split wood or fix a broken water pipe. How she had slowly learned to take care of herself and had even started helping other people who were new to mountain living. Rose used to say that the mountains taught her who she really was, Jake said, accepting a plate of eggs and bacon. Said she never knew how strong she was until she had to be. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Rebecca found herself stealing glances at this strange man who had appeared in her life like some kind of mountain guardian angel. In the daylight, she could see that he was probably in his mid-30s, with laugh lines around his eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said finally. "Sure. Why do you really do this? Check on people, I mean. It can't be just because of my grandmother." Jake set down his fork and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. "I lost my family about 5 years ago," he said. "Car accident on the interstate. My wife and little girl were coming home from visiting her mother, and a drunk driver hit them head-on." Rebecca felt her chest tighten. "I'm so sorry. For a while after that, I didn't want to be around anyone. Couldn't stand the way people looked at me like I might break if they said the wrong thing. So I came up here, bought a piece of land way up in the mountains where nobody could find me." Jake stared out the window at the snow-covered trees. "I was angry at everything. At the drunk driver, at God, at myself for not being in the car with them. I spent 2 years being angry, living like some kind of wild man, barely talking to another human being." "What changed?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Your grandmother found me," Jake said with a small smile. "I don't know how she knew I was up there, but one day she showed up at my place with a casserole and a lecture about how hiding from people wasn't going to bring my family back." Rebecca could almost picture it. Her tiny grandmother, marching up a mountain to confront a grieving giant. Rose kept coming back every few weeks. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she just sat on my porch and talked about the weather or what was happening in town. She never tried to fix me or tell me everything would be okay. She just showed up. Jake turned back to Rebecca. Eventually, I started looking forward to her visits. Then I started visiting her back. She taught me that being alone and being lonely are two different things, that you can choose to be by yourself without cutting yourself off from everyone who might care about you. Rebecca felt something stir in her chest, a recognition of her own situation in Jake's words. So now I do what Rose did, Jake continued. I check on people who are struggling, not to fix them or tell them what to do, but just to show up, to let them know they're not forgotten. But I came here because I wanted to be forgotten, Rebecca said. Did you? Jake asked. Or did you come here because people were making you feel like you weren't worth remembering? The question hit Rebecca like a punch to the stomach. She thought about Michael, about how he had made her feel boring and unwanted, about her old job, where she had been just another number to cut when times got tough, about all the ways the world had told her she wasn't enough. I don't know, she whispered. Jake leaned forward in his chair. Here's what I've learned living up here. The mountains don't care about your past mistakes or your broken dreams. They don't judge you for being divorced or unemployed or scared, but they also don't let you stay weak. They make you grow stronger whether you want to or not. He gestured toward the window, toward the vast wilderness beyond. There are people up here, scattered around in cabins and small towns who have all come for different reasons. Some are running from something, some are looking for something, some just want to live differently. But we take care of each other. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. Rebecca felt tears starting to form in her eyes. I don't know how to be around people anymore. I don't trust anyone. You don't have to trust everyone, Jake said gently. You just have to be willing to let someone show you that not all people are the same. That some people stick around when things get hard instead of running away. He stood up and carried his empty plate to the sink. I'm not asking you to be my friend or to pour your heart out to a stranger. I'm just asking you to let me help you get through your first winter up here. Let me teach you the things you need to know to be safe and comfortable. Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What's in it for you? Jake smiled, and again his whole face transformed. Maybe helping you helps me remember why I'm still here. Maybe your grandmother was right, and the best way to heal yourself is to help someone else heal too. He pulled on his coat and hat. Think about it. If you decide you want to learn some mountain skills, you can reach me on that radio, Channel 7. If you decide you want to keep struggling alone, that's okay too. Either way, I'll still check on you after the next big storm. Rebecca followed him to the door. Jake, yeah? Thank you. For everything. Jake touched the brim of his hat. Thank Rose next time you visit her grave. This was all her idea first. Rebecca watched him walk away through the snow, his footsteps clear and confident in the white wilderness. For the first time since arriving at the cabin, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to figure everything out by herself. Part 4. Building Trust. 3 days passed before Rebecca worked up the courage to use the radio. She had been thinking about Jake's offer, turning it over in her mind like a stone she couldn't stop touching. Part of her wanted to stay hidden in the cabin, safe from any possibility of being hurt again. But another part, a part that was growing stronger each day, was tired of being afraid. The generator had broken down again that morning, leaving her without power for the second time that week. She sat staring at the silent radio Jake had left, its black surface reflecting the light from her candles. Finally, she picked it up and turned it to Channel 7. Hello? She said into the device, feeling foolish. Jake, are you there? Static answered her for a moment. Then Jake's familiar voice came through, warm and clear.
Hey there, Rebecca.
Good to hear from you. What's going on? The generator died again, she said. I don't suppose you know anything about fixing those things. I might know a thing or two, Jake said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'll be over in about an hour. Rebecca spent the next hour cleaning the cabin and making herself presentable, though she wasn't sure why it mattered. When Jake arrived, he brought a toolbox and a thermos of hot chocolate that tasted better than anything she had made in months. Let's go look at this generator, he said after. They had warmed up by the fire. The shed behind the cabin was full of her grandmother, his old tools and supplies. The generator sat in the corner like a sleeping metal beast, covered in dust and spider webs. Jake knelt beside it and started poking around the engine with practiced hands. There's your problem, he said, holding up a part that looked broken to Rebecca. Spark plug's shot and the air filter is clogged with dirt. Easy fix. He spent the next hour showing Rebecca how the generator worked, explaining each part and what it did. His hands were patient as he guided hers through the steps of basic maintenance. Machines are like people, Jake said as they worked. They need attention and care to keep running well. Ignore them too long and they break down on you. Rebecca wondered if he was talking about more than just the generator. When they got the machine running again, the lights in the cabin came back on with a cheerful hum. Rebecca felt a surge of pride that surprised her. She had helped fix something. She had learned something useful. What else do I need to know? She asked. Jake looked at her with those kind brown eyes. Are you sure you want to learn? Mountain living isn't easy, especially for someone who's used to city life. I'm sure, Rebecca said, and she meant it. Over the next few weeks, Jake became a regular visitor to the cabin. He taught Rebecca how to split wood properly, how to read the weather signs in the sky, how to winterize her water pipes so they wouldn't freeze. He showed her which plants in the forest were safe to eat and which ones to avoid, how to preserve food without refrigeration, how to start a fire even when the wood was damp. But Jake didn't just teach her practical skills. He introduced her to the other people who lived scattered throughout the mountains. There was Helen, an elderly woman who lived about 4 miles away and made the best apple pie Rebecca had ever tasted. There was Carla, a single mother with a 10-year-old son who had moved to the mountains to escape an abusive relationship. There was old Pete, a retired veteran who knew everything there was to know about surviving in the wilderness. At first, Rebecca was nervous about meeting these new people. What if they didn't like her? What if she said something wrong? What if they could see how broken she felt inside? But the mountain people were different from anyone she had known in the city. They didn't ask personal questions or try to fix her problems. They didn't judge her for being divorced or for hiding in the mountains. They just accepted her as she was and included her in their quiet community. Helen taught Rebecca how to can vegetables and make preserves that would last through the winter. Carla showed her how to use a chainsaw safely, laughing when Rebecca jumped backward the first time she pulled the starter cord. Old Pete told stories around his fire pit about his adventures in the army and his travels around the world. You're doing better than most city folks, Pete told her one evening as they sat watching the stars. Most people come up here thinking they're going to live some romantic wilderness dream. They last about 2 weeks before they run back to their apartments and their takeout food. What makes the difference? Rebecca asked. Wanting to learn instead of wanting to be rescued, Pete said simply. You can't survive up here waiting for someone else to take care of you. But you also can't make it completely alone. It's a balance. Rebecca thought about that balance a lot. She was learning to be independent, to take care of herself in ways she never had before. But she was also learning to accept help, to be part of a community that supported each other without keeping score. Her freelance design work was going well too. Word had spread somehow that there was a graphic designer living in the mountains, and she started getting clients from the small towns scattered throughout the region. A restaurant that needed a new menu design, a local farm that wanted a website, a craft shop that needed business cards and flyers. Rebecca found herself driving down the mountain more often, meeting with clients and picking up supplies. The winding road that had terrified her when she first arrived was becoming familiar, even comfortable. She was learning to read the weather and plan her trips accordingly. Jake often rode along on these trips, saying he needed to pick up supplies too. But Rebecca suspected he was just making sure she was safe on the mountain roads. She didn't mind. His presence made her feel confident and protected without making her feel helpless. You're getting good at this mountain living thing, Jake said one afternoon as they drove back from town with a truck full of groceries and hardware supplies. I had a good teacher, Rebecca replied. I didn't teach you the important stuff, Jake said. I just showed you the basics. The rest, the courage, the determination, the willingness to try new things, that all came from you. Rebecca felt a warm glow in her chest at his words. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt proud of herself. She was building something here, creating a life that was her own. Jake, she said as they pulled up to her cabin. Yeah? Why do you think my grandmother never told me about this place? About the community up here, about people like you? Jake was quiet for a moment, helping her carry bags into the cabin. Maybe she knew you had to find it yourself, he said finally. Maybe she knew that if someone just told you about it, you wouldn't believe it was real. That night, Rebecca sat by her fire thinking about Jake's words. She thought about the person she had been 6 months ago, scared, heartbroken, convinced that she couldn't trust anyone. She thought about the person she was becoming, stronger, more capable, surrounded by people who cared about her without wanting anything in return. The mountains had changed her, just like Jake said they would. But it wasn't the mountains themselves that had made the difference. It was the people who had chosen to help her, to teach her, to include her in their quiet community of survivors and dreamers. She picked up the radio and switched to Channel 7. "Jake, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice came back immediately. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Rebecca said. "I just wanted to say thank you. For all of it." "You don't need to thank me," Jake replied. "We take care of each other up here. That's just how it works." Rebecca smiled as she set down the radio. Yes, she thought. That's exactly how it works. Part 5. The Growing Community. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing snowstorms that lasted for days and temperatures that made Rebecca's breath freeze in the air. But instead of feeling trapped and frightened like she had during that first storm, she felt prepared and connected. The mountain community had become her lifeline, and she had become part of theirs. The idea started on a particularly cold evening when the power went out across the entire mountain region. Rebecca was sitting by her fire listening to the wind howl outside when her radio crackled to life. "This is Helen," came the elderly woman's voice through the static. "Anyone else lose power up there?" "Jake here," came the immediate response. "My generator's running, but the main lines are definitely down. Probably won't be back up until tomorrow at the earliest." "Carla here," said another voice. "We're okay, but Tommy's worried about his hamster getting too cold." Rebecca picked up her radio. Rebecca checking in. "I'm fine here, but this is a big storm." One by one, other voices joined the conversation. Old Pete reporting from his cabin high up the mountain. Danny, a young man who had moved up from the valley 6 months ago. Martha and Bill, an older couple who ran a small organic farm in a mountain meadow. As the evening went on, the radio check-ins became something more. People started sharing stories, telling jokes, even playing word games over the airwaves. It felt like sitting around a campfire with friends, even though they were all miles apart. "You know what?" Helen said during a lull in the conversation. "We should do this more often. Not just during emergencies." "What do you mean?" Carla asked. "I mean regular get-togethers. Dinners, maybe. Take turns hosting." Old Pete's gravelly voice came through the radio. "I like that idea. Gets lonely up here sometimes, especially in winter." Jake's voice was warm with enthusiasm. "I think that's great. We could start a rotating dinner thing. Everyone takes a turn cooking for the group." Rebecca felt her stomach flutter with nervousness and excitement. "That sounds wonderful, but I'm not much of a cook." "Doesn't matter," Helen said kindly. "It's not about the food. It's about the company." And so the mountain dinner group was born. They decided to meet every 2 weeks, rotating between different cabins. Helen volunteered to host the first gathering, and everyone started making plans despite the storm raging outside. Rebecca spent the next week nervous about the dinner. What would she wear? What would she bring? What if she said something stupid? She had gotten comfortable with these people one-on-one, but being part of a group still made her anxious. Jake must have sensed her nerves when he stopped by to check on her generator. "You're overthinking it," he said as they sat drinking coffee by her fire. "These people already like you. They wouldn't have invited you if they didn't." "How do you know they like me?" Rebecca asked. "Because Helen specifically asked if you were coming. Because Carla mentioned that you helped her design flyers for her soap business. Because Pete told me he thinks you're good people, which is the highest compliment he ever gives anyone." Rebecca felt a warm glow at these words. She had been so focused on her own insecurities that she hadn't noticed how she was fitting into the community. The evening of the first dinner, Jake picked her up in his truck since the road to Helen's place was tricky to navigate in the snow. Rebecca had made a simple salad and spent an hour worrying it wasn't good enough. Helen's cabin was warm and bright, filled with the smell of roasting chicken and fresh bread. The living room had been rearranged to accommodate everyone, with chairs and cushions arranged in a circle around the fireplace. Rebecca counted 8 people as they arrived, more than she had expected. "Rebecca," Helen called out when she walked in. "Come meet everyone." There was Danny, the young man with the shy smile who was studying to be a wildlife photographer. Martha and Bill, the farming couple who had been living off-grid for 20 years and seemed to know everything about sustainable living. A woman named Grace who was a retired nurse and now made beautiful pottery. Tom, a carpenter who built custom furniture from fallen trees. As the evening went on, Rebecca found herself relaxing. These people were easy to be around. They told stories about their lives, shared advice about mountain living, and laughed at each other's jokes. Nobody asked personal questions or tried to pry into her past. They just accepted her as part of the group. "So Rebecca," Grace said as they sat around after dinner, "Jake tells us you're a graphic designer. That must be interesting work." "It can be," Rebecca said. "I mostly work with small businesses, helping them with websites and marketing materials." "That's exactly what we need up here," Martha said excitedly. "So many of us have little businesses, farms, crafts, services, but we don't know how to promote them properly." "I've been trying to get my photography business off the ground," Danny added, "but I have no idea how to make a website or business cards or anything like that." "I could help with that," Rebecca found herself saying. "I'd be happy to help anyone who needs design work." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Grace wanted help designing labels for her pottery. Tom needed a website to showcase his furniture. Even old Pete mentioned that he had been thinking about writing a book about wilderness survival and might need help with the cover design. "This is perfect," Helen said, clapping her hands together. "We can help each other with everything. It's like a real community." As the evening wound down and people started bundling up to head home through the snow, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt useful, needed, like she had something valuable to contribute. "That went well," Jake said as they drove back to Rebecca's cabin. "You seem to have a good time." "I did," Rebecca said, surprised by how true it was. "I can't remember the last time I felt like I belonged somewhere." "You do belong here," Jake said simply. "You're part of this place now." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca threw herself into helping her new friends with their businesses. She designed a beautiful website for Danny's photography, complete with galleries of his stunning nature photos. She created elegant labels for Grace's pottery that made her pieces look professional and expensive. She helped Martha and Bill design a brochure for their organic vegetables that they could give to customers in town. But the work wasn't one-sided. In return, her mountain friends helped her in ways she hadn't expected. Grace taught her how to make pottery, showing her how working with clay could be meditative and healing. Martha and Bill showed her how to grow vegetables in mountain soil, helping her plant a garden for the spring. Tom helped her build better shelving in her cabin and showed her how to identify different types of wood. The dinner gatherings became the highlight of Rebecca's weeks. Each one was different depending on who was hosting and what was happening in their lives. At Carla's cabin, they played board games and Tommy taught everyone how to fold origami animals. At old Pete's place, they sat around his fire pit and listened to his stories about the old days. At the farm, Martha and Bill served vegetables they had grown themselves and taught everyone how to preserve food for winter. Rebecca hosted her second dinner in January, and she was amazed at how natural it felt to have her cabin full of friends. She made a big pot of chili and cornbread and everyone raved about how good it was. Jake brought his guitar and led them in singing old folk songs. Grace brought her latest pottery creations to show off. Danny shared photos from his latest hiking expedition. "You know what I love about this group?" Carla said as they sat around Rebecca's fireplace. "We all come from different places and different backgrounds, but we just fit together somehow." "It's because we all chose to be here," Tom said thoughtfully. "We're not stuck together because of where we were born or what jobs we have. We're here because this is where we want to be." Rebecca looked around at these people who had become so important to her. 6 months ago, she had been hiding in this cabin, afraid of human contact, convinced that she couldn't trust anyone. Now she was surrounded by friends who cared about her success and happiness. "I have an idea," she said suddenly. "What if we created a website for all of us? Like a directory of mountain businesses and services. We could help each other and help newcomers find what they need." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Within an hour, they had planned out the entire site. Rebecca would design it, Danny would provide photos, and everyone would contribute content about their services and businesses. "We should call it Mountain Family," Helen suggested, "because that's what we are now." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes at the word family. She had thought that families were something you were born into or married into, something that could be taken away from you when relationships failed. But this was different. This was a family she had chosen, and that had chosen her back. As the evening ended and everyone prepared to brave the cold night air, Jake lingered behind to help Rebecca clean up. "You did good tonight," he said as they washed dishes together. "This whole community thing was your idea, really. You brought us all together." "You brought me into it," Rebecca replied. "I never would have found this on my own." "Maybe," Jake said. "But you're the one who made it into something special. You see, the best in people help them shine. That's a gift." Part 6. Facing the past spring came early to the mountains that year, melting the snow into rushing streams and covering the hillsides with wildflowers. Rebecca stood on her front porch, breathing in the sweet air and marveling at how different she felt from the broken woman who had arrived here almost a year ago. Her garden was already planted, her cabin was weatherproofed and comfortable, and her design business was thriving with clients from all over the mountain region. She was admiring the new wooden sign that Tom had carved for her, Mountain Family Design Services, when she heard a car engine struggling up the mountain road. Visitors were rare this far up, and most of her friends called on the radio before stopping by. Rebecca shaded her eyes against the morning sun and watched a sleek black sedan bump and scrape its way up the dirt road. Her heart sank as the car got closer. She recognized it even though it was now covered in dust and had a scratch along one side from the narrow mountain road. It was Michael's car. The man who climbed out of the driver's seat looked exactly the same as he had when she left the city. Perfectly styled hair, expensive clothes, irritated expression. He stood beside his damaged car looking around at the mountain wilderness like he had landed on an alien planet. "Rebecca," he called out when he spotted her on the porch. "There you are. Do you have any idea how hard you were to find?" Rebecca's legs felt shaky, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Hello, Michael. What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" Michael laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I'm here to bring you home. This little mountain adventure has gone on long enough." He started walking toward the cabin, his city shoes slipping on the uneven ground. "Look at this place, Rebecca. You're living like some kind of hermit. This isn't you. How do you know what's me?" Rebecca asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "You never bothered to find out when we were married." Michael reached the porch and stopped, looking her up and down with obvious disapproval. Rebecca was wearing jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt, clothes she had learned were practical for mountain life. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her hands showed the calluses that came from splitting wood and working in the garden. "Look at yourself," Michael said with disgust. "You look like a completely different person. What happened to the woman I married?" "She grew up," Rebecca replied. Michael shook his head and pulled out his phone, frowning at the lack of signal bars. "This is ridiculous. You can't get decent cell service, you're miles from civilization, and you're living in some rundown cabin in the middle of nowhere. Come home with me, Rebecca. We can work things out." "Work what out?" Rebecca asked. "The fact that you cheated on me? The fact that you filed for divorce? Or the fact that you made me feel worthless for the last 2 years of our marriage?" "I made a mistake," Michael said, and for the first time he sounded less confident. "Ashley and it didn't work out. She was too young, too immature. I realize now that what we had was special." Rebecca stared at him in amazement. "What we had was you coming home late every night, ignoring me when I tried to talk to you, and making me feel like I was boring and stupid." "I was going through a rough patch at work," Michael said. "I wasn't myself, but I've got a promotion now. More money than we ever dreamed of. We could have a great life together." "We?" Rebecca shook her head. "There is no we, Michael. You made sure of that when you decided I wasn't worth fighting for." Michael's expression hardened. "Fine. If you want to be stubborn about it, let's talk money. You're not making any real income up here playing around with your little design hobby. How are you even surviving?" "My design business is doing very well, thank you," Rebecca said. "I have more clients than I can handle, and I love the work I'm doing. Designing flyers for farm stands and websites for hillbilly businesses," Michael scoffed. "Come on, Rebecca. You're wasting your talent up here. I can get you a real job at a real company in the city." "This is real work," Rebecca said, feeling anger start to build in her chest. "I'm helping real people build real businesses. I'm part of a community that actually values what I do." "Community?" Michael looked around at the empty forest. "What community? I don't see anyone else for miles." As if summoned by his words, the sound of Jake's truck rumbled up the mountain road. Rebecca felt a wave of relief as the familiar blue pickup came into view. Jake must have been heading to town and decided to check if she needed anything. Jake parked behind Michael's sedan and climbed out, taking in the scene with calm, observant eyes. He was wearing work clothes and boots, his beard neatly trimmed, his presence solid and reassuring. "Everything okay here?" Jake asked, his voice friendly but alert. Michael looked Jake up and down with obvious disdain. "And you are?" "Jake Thompson," Jake replied, extending a hand that Michael ignored. "I'm a friend of Rebecca's." "A friend," Michael repeated with a smirk. "I see, Rebecca. Is this what you've been doing up here? Shacking up with some mountain man?" Rebecca felt her face flush with anger. "That's none of your business, Michael. And even if it were, Jake is a better man than you'll ever be." "Oh, please," Michael said. "Look at him. What's he do for a living, chop wood? Trap animals? Rebecca, you went to college. You're smart, educated, sophisticated. What are you doing with someone like this?" Jake's expression didn't change, but Rebecca saw his jaw tighten slightly. Before he could respond, she stepped forward. "You want to know what Jake does?" Rebecca said, her voice rising. "He saves people. He helped me survive my first winter up here. He taught me skills I never knew I needed. He introduced me to friends who actually care about me. He shows up when people need help, and he doesn't ask for anything in return." "How noble," Michael said sarcastically. "I'm sure that pays the bills." "Actually, he runs a very successful guide service," Rebecca continued. "He's also a trained EMT who has saved more lives than you could count. He builds furniture that sells for thousands of dollars to rich city people who want something real in their fake lives. And unlike you, he's never once made me feel small or stupid or worthless." Michael's face was getting red now. "I never made you feel worthless." "Yes, you did," Rebecca said firmly. "Every day. With every eye roll when I talked about my work. With every time you chose to look at your phone instead of listening to me. With every night you came home late without explanation. You made me feel like I was invisible." "That's not how I meant it," Michael protested. "It doesn't matter how you meant it," Rebecca replied. "That's how it was." Jake stepped closer to Rebecca, not threateningly, but supportively. "Maybe you should go," he said to Michael quietly. "Rebecca's made it clear she doesn't want to talk to you." "I'm not talking to you," Michael snapped. "This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," Rebecca corrected. "The divorce was final 6 months ago." "A mistake we can fix," Michael said desperately. "Rebecca, be reasonable. What kind of future do you have up here? You'll never find someone who can give you the life you deserve." "I already have the life I deserve," Rebecca said. "I have work that matters, friends who care about me, and a place where I belong. That's more than I ever had with you." Michael looked around at the cabin, the mountains, the simple life Rebecca had built. "This isn't real life, Rebecca. This is just you hiding from the world because you're afraid to try again." "You're wrong," Rebecca said with absolute certainty. "This is the most real my life has ever been. And I'm not hiding from anything anymore." Michael stared at her for a long moment, and Rebecca could see him trying to reconcile the confident woman standing before him with the timid, uncertain person he had divorced. "Fine," he said finally. "But when this little fantasy falls apart, when winter comes again and you realize how lonely and isolated you really are, don't come crying to me." "I won't," Rebecca said simply. Michael got back in his car and slammed the door. The engine started with difficulty, and he had to back up carefully to turn around on the narrow road. As he drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and exhaust fumes, Rebecca could see him on his phone, probably already complaining to someone about his wasted trip. Jake put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Rebecca took a deep breath of the clean mountain air. "Yes," she said, and realized she meant it completely. "I'm actually great." "He was wrong, you know," Jake said quietly. "About what kind of future you have up here. You have whatever kind of future you want to build." Rebecca looked at this man who had become so important to her, who had never once made her feel like she needed to be anyone other than who she was. "What if the future I want to build includes you?" Jake's face broke into a slow, warm smile. "Then I'd say you're building something pretty good." As they stood together on the porch, watching the dust from Michael's car settle on the mountain road, Rebecca felt something she had never experienced before. She felt completely at peace with who she was and where she belonged. The past had come looking for her, trying to drag her back to a life that had never really fit. But she was different now, stronger now, and she knew without any doubt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Part 7. A life-changing decision. The morning after Michael's visit, Rebecca woke up feeling lighter than she had in years. She lay in bed listening to the birds singing outside her window and realized that seeing her ex-husband again had done something unexpected. It had shown her just how much she had grown and changed. She made coffee and sat on her front porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. The beauty of it still took her breath away, even after living here for almost a year. Her phone buzzed with a text message, something that still felt strange in this place where technology often failed to reach. The message was from a woman named Lisa Chen, who ran a marketing agency in Denver. Rebecca, I got your name from Danny Morrison, who said you designed his photography website. I've been following your work online and I'm impressed. Would you be interested in discussing a partnership opportunity? We have clients who specifically want that authentic, mountain aesthetic you create. Rebecca stared at the message for a long moment. A year ago, she would have jumped at the chance to work with a big city agency. It would have felt like validation, like proof that her work was worth something. But now the idea of partnering with a corporation felt strange and distant. She was still thinking about the message when Jake's truck pulled up. He climbed out carrying a thermos of coffee and a bag that smelled like Helen's famous cinnamon rolls. Thought you might need some comfort food after yesterday, he said, settling into the chair beside her on the porch. I'm actually feeling pretty good about yesterday, Rebecca said, showing him the text message. But look at this. What do you think? Jake read the message carefully. Sounds like a good opportunity. How do you feel about it? That's just it, Rebecca said. I don't know how I feel. A year ago, this would have been a dream come true. Now I'm not sure I want it. What's changed? Jake asked gently. Rebecca thought about it. Everything, I guess. My priorities, my definition of success, what makes me happy. Working with a big agency means deadlines and corporate clients and probably traveling back to the city for meetings. It means getting pulled back into that world I worked so hard to escape. But it also means recognition for your talent, Jake pointed out, and probably good money. I already have recognition from people who matter to me, Rebecca said. And I'm making good money helping people I care about build something real. Jake smiled. Sounds like you've already made your decision. Maybe I have, Rebecca said. But then her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. But when she answered, a familiar voice came through clearly. Rebecca, this is Amy. Her sister's voice sounded excited and a little breathless. I just got off the phone with Michael. He told me he went to see you. Rebecca sighed. Amy, I don't want to talk about Michael. No, you don't understand, Amy said quickly. He told me about your life up there, about your business and everything. Rebecca, I had no idea you were doing so well. Michael said I was doing well? Rebecca asked, surprised. Well, not exactly, Amy admitted. He said you were living like a hermit and dating some mountain man and wasting your education. But between the lines, it sounded like you've built something amazing. Rebecca found herself smiling. I guess I have. I want to come see for myself, Amy said. Would that be okay? I could bring the kids. They've never seen real mountains. The idea of her sister visiting filled Rebecca with equal parts excitement and nervousness. Amy had always been the successful one, the one with the perfect marriage and the beautiful house and the impressive career. What would she think of Rebecca's simple mountain life? Of course you can come, Rebecca said. I'd love to see you and the kids. After she hung up, Jake was looking at her with an amused expression. Busy morning for phone calls. My sister wants to visit, Rebecca said. She's never seen this place or met any of you. I'm a little nervous about what she'll think. She'll think you're happy, Jake said simply. And that's all that matters. Over the next few days, Rebecca found herself looking at her life through new eyes, trying to imagine how it would appear to Amy. Her cabin was small but beautifully decorated with pottery from Grace and furniture built by Tom. Her garden was flourishing, providing fresh vegetables for her meals and the community dinners. Her design business had grown to the point where she was turning away clients because she was too busy. She decided to respond to Lisa Chen's email, but not in the way the marketing executive probably expected. Instead of accepting the partnership, Rebecca wrote back with a counterproposal. She would be happy to work on specific projects that aligned with her values, but she wasn't interested in giving up her autonomy or her mountain lifestyle. The response came back within hours. Lisa was intrigued by Rebecca's approach and wanted to discuss it further. Several of her clients were specifically looking for designers who understood rural and outdoor lifestyles, and Rebecca's portfolio was exactly what they needed. "I think we could work something out," Lisa wrote. "Would you be open to a video call to discuss terms?" Rebecca found herself excited about the possibility. This felt different from the corporate partnerships she had pursued in her old life. This felt like an opportunity to share her authentic voice with a wider audience while staying true to the life she had built. She called a community meeting that evening, using the radio network that had become their informal communication system. Within an hour, her cabin was full of friends, all curious about what she wanted to discuss. "I've been offered some opportunities to expand my business," Rebecca began, feeling nervous but determined. "But before I make any decisions, I want to talk to all of you about what it might mean for our community." She explained about Lisa's offer and Amy's visit, about the possibility of taking on bigger clients and more complex projects. "The thing is," Rebecca continued, "this community, all of you, you're the most important thing in my life. I don't want to do anything that might change that or take me away from here." Helen reached over and patted her hand. "Honey, success doesn't have to mean leaving the people you love behind. Besides," Danny added, "if you get famous for your design work, maybe it'll bring more attention to all our businesses." Mountain Family could become a real brand. Old Pete nodded slowly. "Girl's got talent. Be ashamed to waste it hiding up here in the hills." "I'm not hiding anymore," Rebecca said firmly, "but I also don't want to lose what I've found here." "Then don't," Jake said quietly. "Set your own terms. Build the business you want, not the one other people expect you to build." Carla raised her hand like they were in school. "What if you could help other people find what you found here? Through your work, I mean. Show people that there's a different way to live." The idea hit Rebecca like lightning. "That's it," she said, jumping up from her chair. "That's exactly it." She spent the rest of the evening brainstorming with her friends about how to expand her business while staying true to her values. They talked about creating a design studio that showcased mountain crafts and rural businesses, about developing a retreat program where city people could come learn about sustainable living and community building, about using her growing reputation to shine a spotlight on the kind of life they had all chosen to build together. By the time everyone left that night, Rebecca had a clear vision of what she wanted to create. Not just a successful business, but a bridge between the world she had left behind and the world she had discovered in the mountains. The next morning, she called Lisa Chen back with a new proposal. Instead of joining the marketing agency, Rebecca wanted to create something entirely new. A design collective that specialized in authentic rural and outdoor brands, based right here in the mountains. It would be like a destination creative studio, Rebecca explained during their video call. Clients could come here to work directly with local artisans and farmers and outdoor guides. They'd get authentic inspiration for their brands while supporting rural communities. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, and Rebecca held her breath. "That's brilliant," Lisa said finally. "I have 3 clients right now who would pay premium rates for that kind of authentic experience. When can you start?" Rebecca looked out her window at the mountains that had become her home, at the community garden where her friends grew food together, at the workshop where Tom was building furniture from fallen trees. "I think I already have," she said with a smile. That afternoon, she walked down to the small cemetery where her grandmother was buried. The simple headstone was surrounded by wildflowers, and Rebecca knelt down to pull a few weeds that had grown up around the base. "I think I finally understand why you loved it here so much, Grandma," she said quietly. "It's not just about the mountains or the peace and quiet. It's about finding out who you really are when you're not trying to be what everyone else expects." A gentle breeze rustled through the pine trees, and Rebecca felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was exactly where she belonged, building exactly the life she was meant to live. When Amy arrived the following week with her 2 kids, she found Rebecca glowing with happiness and purpose. The successful business, the warm community, the beautiful mountain setting, it was everything Amy had never known she wanted for her sister. "You look so different." Part 8. Full Circle. 1 year later, Rebecca stood in her expanded design studio, watching the sunrise through the large windows that Tom had installed last spring. The old cabin had grown into something beautiful, part home, part creative workspace, part community gathering place. Shelves displayed pottery from Grace, furniture from Tom, and photographs from Danny. The walls were covered with designs she had created for businesses all across the mountain region and beyond. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the Mountain Family website, another inquiry from a city business wanting to work with their rural design collective. Rebecca smiled as she read the message, then set the phone aside. She would answer it later, after her morning ritual of watching the mountains wake up. The sound of a car struggling up the mountain road caught her attention. It was too early for clients or friends, and the engine sounded strained in a way that reminded her of something. Rebecca stepped onto her porch and felt her heart skip when she saw the small red sedan bumping along the dirt road. The car looked like it had been through a battle. Mud caked the sides, a crack spiderwebbed across the windshield, and steam rose from under the hood. When it finally limped to a stop in front of her cabin, Rebecca could hear the engine making unhealthy knocking sounds. The driver's door opened and a young man climbed out slowly. He was thin and pale, with tired eyes and the careful movements of someone who had been hurt. His clothes were wrinkled like he had been sleeping in them, and he carried himself like a person who was trying very hard to hold himself together. Rebecca recognized that posture. She had worn it herself not so long ago. The young man looked around at the mountains, at the cabin, at Rebecca standing on the porch. His expression was lost and uncertain, like he wasn't sure he was in the right place. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice hoarse. "I'm looking for Jake Thompson. Someone in town said he lived up this way." "Jake lives about 2 miles further up the mountain," Rebecca replied, walking down from the porch. "But his road is pretty rough. I don't think your car is going to make it." The young man looked back at his damaged vehicle and laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out. I probably shouldn't have tried to drive up here in the first place." He ran a hand through his hair, and Rebecca noticed the slight tremor in his fingers. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'll figure something else out." "What's your name?" Rebecca asked gently. "David," he said. "David Martinez. I just got out of the army a few weeks ago. Someone at the VA hospital told me Jake might be able to help me find a place to stay up here. Said he helped veterans sometimes." Rebecca felt her heart clench with recognition and sympathy. This young man had the same lost, broken look she had, seen in her own mirror when she first arrived in the mountains. "David," she said, stepping closer. "When's the last time you had a hot meal?" David's laugh was shaky. "I honestly can't remember. Couple days, maybe." "Come on inside," Rebecca said, gesturing toward the cabin. "Let me make you some breakfast, and then we'll figure out how to get you up to Jake's place." David hesitated. "I don't want to impose. You don't even know me." "That's okay," Rebecca said with a smile. "Someone helped me when I was exactly where you are now. It's my turn to pass it along." David followed her inside, his eyes widening as he took in the warm, welcoming space. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the artwork and crafts that filled the room. The smell of coffee and wood smoke made the cabin feel like a home. "This is beautiful," David said quietly. "You live here alone?" "I do," Rebecca replied, starting to cook eggs and bacon on her efficient little stove. "But I'm not lonely. There's a whole community of people up here who look out for each other." As she cooked, Rebecca told David about the mountain community, about Jake and Helen and all the others who had helped her find her place in the world. She talked about the dinner group and the way everyone supported each other's businesses and dreams. "It sounds too good to be true," David said, accepting a plate of hot food with grateful hands. "I thought the same thing when I first got here," Rebecca said. "I was running away from a divorce and a job loss. I came up here thinking I wanted to hide from the world forever." David looked at her with surprise. "You seem so together, like you've got everything figured out." Rebecca laughed. "Trust me, I was a mess when I arrived. I couldn't even keep a fire going in the wood stove. I was scared of everything. The isolation, the quiet, the idea of having to depend on myself." "What changed?" David asked. "Jake showed up at my door during a snowstorm," Rebecca said, pouring him a second cup of coffee. "Just like you're going to show up at his door today. He didn't try to fix me or tell me what to do. He just helped me learn how to take care of myself, and he introduced me to people who became family. David ate in silence for a while, and Rebecca could see him processing what she had told him. Finally, he looked up at her with eyes that held a glimmer of something that might have been hope. "Do you think Jake would really help me?" he asked. "I mean, I don't have much money, and I'm kind of a mess right now." "That's exactly when Jake helps people," Rebecca said firmly. "When they're at their lowest point and don't think anyone cares, that's his specialty." She picked up her radio and switched to Channel 7. "Jake, are you there?" Jake's voice came through immediately, warm and familiar. "Morning, Rebecca. What's going on?" "I've got someone here who needs to meet you," Rebecca said. "A veteran named David. His car broke down trying to get up to your place." "Is he okay?" Jake asked, concern clear in his voice. Rebecca looked at David, who was listening with intense attention. "He's okay, but he could use some help getting back on his feet." "Bring him up," Jake said without hesitation. "I'll put the coffee on." After breakfast, Rebecca loaded some supplies into her truck and helped David gather his few belongings from his broken-down car. As they drove up the winding mountain road to Jake's place, she told him more about the community he was about to enter. "The thing about this place," Rebecca said as they navigated a particularly steep curve, "is that nobody judges you for your past or asks too many questions about why you're here. We all came here for different reasons, but we all found the same thing. A place where we could be ourselves without apology." Jake's cabin appeared around the next bend, and Rebecca felt the same sense of peace she always experienced when she came here. It was bigger than her place, built from logs and stone, with a workshop attached to one side and a garden spreading out behind it. Jake emerged from the cabin as they pulled up, and Rebecca watched David's reaction to meeting the man who had changed so many lives. Jake was as imposing as ever. Tall and broad with his thick beard, but his eyes were kind and his smile was genuine. "David," Jake said, extending a large hand. "Welcome to the mountains." David shook Jake's hand, and Rebecca could see some of the tension leave his shoulders. There was something about Jake's presence that made people feel safe, like they had found refuge after a long, difficult journey. "Rebecca told me you might be able to help me find a place to stay," David said hesitantly. "I'm looking for somewhere quiet, away from everything." "I know exactly what you mean," Jake said with understanding. "Come on inside, let's talk." Rebecca stayed for an hour, helping Jake and David discuss the practical matters of mountain living. There was a small cabin about a mile up, the road that had been empty for months. The previous owner had moved back to the city when the isolation became too much for him. "It needs some work," Jake explained. "Roof leaks, plumbing's questionable, and the wood stove hasn't been cleaned in years. But it's got good bones, and the price is right." "I'm not afraid of work," David said quickly. "I'm actually pretty handy with repairs and construction." "Perfect," Jake said. "Tell you what, you help me with some projects around here and I'll help you fix up that cabin. By winter, you'll have a place that's completely yours." Rebecca watched this exchange with a full heart. She was seeing the same kindness and generosity that had saved her own life being extended to someone else who desperately needed it. "I should get going," she said, standing up from Jake's kitchen table. "I've got client calls this morning." As she prepared to leave, David caught her arm gently. "Thank you," he said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't helped me." "You would have figured it out," Rebecca said with a smile. "But now you don't have to figure it out alone." Driving back down the mountain, Rebecca thought about the circle that had just completed itself. A year and a half ago, she had been in David's exact position, lost, broken, unsure if she could trust anyone again. Jake had appeared in her life like a guardian angel, offering help without conditions and introducing her to a community that had become her chosen family. Now she was the one offering that first hand of friendship to someone new. She was the bridge between the old life of pain and isolation and the new life of community and purpose. Her radio crackled to life as she pulled into her driveway. "This is Helen," came the familiar voice. "Community dinner tonight at my place. We're welcoming a new member to the family." Other voices joined the conversation quickly. Carla volunteering to bring her famous cornbread. Grace offering to bring flowers from her garden.